Okay, we are now on the third section of this creating a paper handout. And the third section has to do with incorporating research. So once we've completed our research, then basically how do we use this research? It's very, very important that you remember that when you're writing a paper, it should be your argument using your words primarily. Your quotes that you use from your primary source are to support what you have to say, and the quotes that you use from secondary sources should basically support your argument. So you're using quotes from your primary source or paraphrasing your primary source and giving credit to that primary source to support your point about the work, okay? So you always want to tie it into what your point is. And then you're summarizing, paraphrasing and or quoting and giving credit to secondary sources to essentially lend an authoritative voice to what it is you're saying, this is what I think, and hey, looky here, this critic thinks it too. So we always want to make sure that we are making an argument. This is argument. We are trying to persuade the reader of our point of view about the work. So we want to be sure to avoid simply summarizing. And I'm going to read you some examples here. So this first example is summary only. The student isn't really presenting an argument in this portion of a paragraph. Rather, they are just summarizing what happens in the play. It says, in The Glass Menagerie, Williams begins the play in Act 1, Scene 1 with the Wingfield family at dinner. During the dinner, Amanda, the mother, criticizes Tom, her son, for eating inappropriately. Tom yells at her in response while Laura remains fairly quiet. The dinner is interrupted when Amanda begins to discuss the 17 gentlemen callers that she had in Blue Mountain. Okay, and then we've cited it, and so that's correct. We've cited, where this summary is coming from in the play. So while it's correct in its citation, it's not making an argument. It's not really saying anything that anyone who's read the play wouldn't already know. And it's not establishing your point about this scene. So in the second version, you see this is an argument that happens to include summary, but it's argument being made. In The Glass Menagerie, Williams begins the play in Act 1, Scene 1 with the Wingfield family at dinner. And we cite Act 1, Scene 1, the Wingfield family at dinner, because that's our summary of that scene. The meal quickly reveals a family in turmoil as Tom and Amanda bicker and Laura retreats to her dream world. This beginning scene foreshadows the destruction of the family that is to come and introduces the reader to the first symbol of Amanda's personal failures, the 17 gentlemen callers. Alright, so basically the rest of the passage after that first sentence, while I note events that happen in that first scene, the points of each sentence are to show the reader something about my argument. So you know that my point is basically we begin to see turmoil, we begin to see one of the characters retreating, and that this is all foreshadowing and an introduction to the first symbol of the play that I'm going to talk about, which is the 17 gentlemen callers. Alright, so you can see how that's argument. I'm saying something about the scene that's supporting my overall point or thesis. So that second way is pretty much how we want to, introduce points or begin paragraphs. We might have some summary or introduce any kind of point within a paragraph. We might have some summary, and that's normal, or even a quote, and that's normal. But we will always want to explain what this has to do with our point. Why do we care? What do you have to say about this other than this is what happened? Okay. You want to use your secondary sources in a similar way. Basically, they could possibly provide information that you didn't already know. But generally, what they're doing is they're lending an authoritative voice to support your point. So it's basically like saying, this is what I think, and explaining what you think, and then saying, and then also Bloom agrees with this, and you can see how Bloom or the critic agrees with this. Alright, so when we quote or summarize a source, we first want to introduce our quote. That's the first thing you want to do, is give an introduction for it, what's about to be given. And that might be done within the sentence that you give the quote, or it might be done in the sentence before giving the quote. Then we want to give our quote and make sure we cite it in text properly. We will also need to remember that we will have to include this source on our works cited page. And then we want to explain why this particular quote or information was included and how it supports our point. Okay, so 3 steps. Introduce the quote, give the quote and cite it, and explain how this fits into your argument. Alright, so we're going to start with the improper use of a quote, or bad use of a quote. When reviewing the Glass Menagerie, the primary symbol that greets the reader is the menagerie itself. Bloom writes, the Wingfield family is one that is on the brink of destruction from the first scene. The reader can see this in the glass collection. Alright, so while we make the point in the first sentence that the primary symbol of the Glass Menagerie greets us, we don't really introduce what Bloom's about to say, other than to say he writes this. The Wingfield family is one that is on the brink of destruction from the first scene. And then we don't really explain how Bloom's quote relates to the menagerie. What is it about the scene that shows that they're fragile? A better use of the quote would be the good use of the quote. When reviewing the Glass Menagerie, the primary symbol that greets the reader is the menagerie itself. Clear and fragile, the collection represents the obvious delicate nature of the Wingfield family. Bloom states, the Wingfield family is one that is on the brink of destruction from the first scene. Clearly, Williams wants to make the delicate nature of the Wingfield family apparent to any observer.